Hi, I'm Jessie.
Hi, I'm Ryan, and you're listening to Your Therapist is Not Okay.
Today you're listening to part two on how we want you to have good sex, how to talk about it, how to navigate it within yourself, and what it means to actually engage in a way that allows you to have the maximum pleasure.
And we are really thinking today that, whatever kind of sex you might be having or interested in having, whether it's with one partner, multiple partners, or maybe more of a hookup culture thing that you're engaging in, there's still this sense of intimacy and vulnerability. And the way you navigate it might be different in different contexts. But the good communication that we want to talk about around sex really can apply to everything. And I would really encourage folks to focus on having the good quality sex that you're wanting. And a little bit of work going into the communication about that can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Last episode, we were talking about the shame that can be attached to talking about sex and even navigating what pleasure looks like. We were talking about how a lot of times in the education we have around sex, we don't find out about where pleasure points are, how to experience pleasure, what we might want. And that's probably because we're also in high school. Everything's a bit kind of awkward and we don't know how to ask those questions. But it means that we grow up in this silence around pleasure. And so I think the very first thing that we want you to do, pause this podcast if you need to, as we're asking these questions, just to really start to reflect on what you want. And that is the first question. When you're thinking about having good sex, it does not start with your partner, it starts with you. So, what are your turn-ons?
Yeah, this is a really great place to just really start to think and engage with yourself. Obviously, there's a lot about sex that's about engaging with another person, but you've got to first kind of engage with and understand yourself to a degree. Now, I feel like we're always evolving and learning new things about ourselves and shifting and changing. So this is not to say establish this thing and then move on. This is something to often check in. Where does my body feel good? What have I liked or not liked in the past that I've tried? What have I maybe seen or read about that I would like to try? And just kind of really knowing that, allowing yourself to engage with what is actually exciting and turning on for you, which might be different from what you've been told you're supposed to like and be interested in.
A really good website for women and women's pleasure is Oh My God, Yes. It is a subscription, but it's forever. You get a lot of videos on showing you angles for your body, what kind of clitoral pleasure you might have, what kind of penetrative pleasure you might want. And it really takes the shame and the guesswork out of it. There are a ton
Mm.
of others. That's one that a lot of people have found success with. It's also a way to start to recognize that this conversation does not have to be taboo.
Yeah, that's absolutely cool. I didn't know anything about that website. I'm glad you shared that. I also just like the name of it is funny and cool, but it is also kind of the spirit behind what we're talking about right now is like we want you to figure out what are the things that you're saying, oh my God, yes to. Like I want that. That's exciting to me. That feels great to me.
Yes.
Um, and then to also know the things that don't feel great to you, whether it's a sensation that you don't like, or it's a kind of vulnerability that doesn't feel okay for you, or if it's just like something about that act just doesn't do it for you,
Yep.
takes you out of that sexy feeling for whatever reason. And know that that's something you don't have to do.
Absolutely. Once you know that, those two things allow you to start to think about what you fantasize about.
Mm.
What might you want when it comes to sex? Do you want to try that fantasy that you might have? Or is it something that just lives in you for yourself? And asking yourself why you might want it or why you might not is also a really cool question. There's a lot of times we might fantasize by something that we really don't want our partner to try. It's for us, it's for ours alone, and that's awesome. But knowing why is a really cool way to start to fully understand what our desires are.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's will be interesting for you to kind of, once we talk more about communication as well, sharing these fantasies and exploring them with folks, and also figuring out what kind of dynamics you like with a partner, and learning some of those things. 'Cause there are quite a few people out there that like one of their favorite things is being a part of someone else's fantasy. So
Yeah.
for some folks, the exciting thing might be like, oh, you want me to try this, and like I'm really excited to do that for you.
Yes.
And maybe you're a person that has that as well. Maybe you really want to hear about your partner's fantasies and help them fulfill them because that's exciting to you.
And that is actually part of turn-ons. If you
Mhm.
realize, ooh, I like this idea.
Mhm.
If you want to engage in sex with multiple partners, maybe you're really excited about being a guest star in someone else's sex life. These are turn-ons. This isn't just about the other partner, but what makes you excited? And
Mhm.
the converse of that I'm going to say is think about this one. Is there anything that you want that might be hard to talk about? And
Mhm.
understanding that under like kind of concept will also allow you to start to question the why behind that. Why is this difficult? What am I nervous about? It gives you that foothold of self-awareness that immediately allows this topic to be something that you're engaging with instead of just going along with.
Yeah, absolutely. That's lots of the things that people are interested in are, for whatever reason, hard to talk about, especially with the stigma that we talked about in the previous episode. That's one of those things that can shut down that feeling like, oh, I could tell my partner I want to try this. Um, Thinking about social stigma and expectations, that also kind of brings us to the idea of performance around sex. How are we supposed to act and do and feel and express during sex?
Yeah. There is a lot that comes through my office on, especially within my women identifying clients, of performance,
Mhm.
that when I ask them what they want or what turns them on, that almost feels like the first time they've been asked that question. And the reason why is because there's this almost need to perform, that when I'm giving oral sex, I need to look a certain way. When I'm receiving oral sex, I need to sound a certain way. I need to make these sounds. I need to perform in this way. I need to look a certain way. I don't want to be messy. I don't want to just be quiet and enjoying this because there's a certain level of my participation that needs to be performative. And it's really fascinating when you start to question those things and think about, if you do masturbate, how do you masturbate? Do you make sounds? Do you contort your body in certain ways? Are you doing those with a sexual partner?
Mm.
Why? Where does that come from? How might you feel safe enough to not do that? Do you like performing, or would you feel more comfortable and in your body and being able to have pleasure if you took that part away?
Mm. Yeah, those are interesting things to think about and to, I think we see depicted in so much media and pop culture kind of stuff, especially a couple decades ago, that kind of like were often discussions about faking orgasms or, needing to seem like I'm having a ton of pleasure that we heard from women. And that's not something that's gone. That's still
Yeah.
something that comes up, absolutely. I do think there's a foil of it with men where in pop culture and in day-to-day life, a lot of men or male identifying people are expected to always want to have sex, to always be horny, to always be seeking it. And so it can be actually surprising or a change for someone who's in a relationship with a man, and then the man is like, "Nah, I'm not
I'm
horny
not
right
feeling
now.
it.
I'm
Yeah.
not feeling it. I'm not, like, oh, what's wrong? And that can double back too on the other party and be like, oh, is there something wrong with me that I don't want sex all the time? And that's another part of this knowing yourself, learning how much sex do I like? How often do I like to have sex? Do I like to have sex for a long time or a short time?
Yes.
And none of your answers to those things are wrong.
Not at all. And linking back to what you were saying about men, does it feel like you haven't succeeded if you don't come?
Mm.
Can you have sex and feel all this pleasure and maybe not ejaculate? Is that okay? The answer, hint, hint, is yes. That's still an incredible engagement, but we often position the final kind of crescendo of sex is when a man has pleasure or a woman has like an orgasm.
Hmm.
And those kinds of things can put you in this loop of performance and pressure. And that can be really tricky if you're not experiencing those things in the bedroom.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that would be the next thing to really think about that we want you to. Before we get into talking about it, this is knowing thyself. What
Hmm.
would you be able to do for your body, for yourself, with a therapist to allow yourself to figure out how do I turn off my head and how do I feel pleasure? When performance may not be there, or you potentially really feel pleasure with it, figuring that answer out for yourself.
Mm.
And also, what can happen that I can tune into my body without my brain being so active that it's constantly telling me things? Because when the body's feeling and the brain's saying a bunch of signals, we're actually probably more in our head than we'd like to admit. So, how do we allow our body to take over and to feel pleasure?
There is one of the things that I like about us starting with knowing yourself is that there can be something really beautiful about being selfish during sex. Um, just focusing on the pleasure you're feeling and receiving. A lot of the stuff that comes up with needing to perform or performance issues like erectile dysfunction that we talked about last time are when we're very worried about what the other person is feeling or doing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying don't give your partner pleasure.
No.
Do that for sure. But I'm saying don't be so focused on other things and other people that you're not even present in that body sensation that you're having right there.
That's a really good kind of part to think about. Yeah. What do you need first? Let's move on to talking and asking and communicating about sex. And this is now when the two of you come together. And we'll break it down into talking about it before sex, talking about it during sex, and what might you discuss after having sex.
Yeah. Yeah. We were thinking about like when can you talk about sex? We're like, well, basically all the time. Basically before, during, and after. Like you could talk about that anytime, whether it's talking about it with an established partner or talking about it with someone that you are wanting to hook up with or start being intimate with. Um, Asking exactly as Jesse was saying with that example in your office of like people being like, this is the first time someone's ever asked me what I like, what I'm into. You can be that person that's asking a new partner about that and saying like, what are you into? What feels good for you? And it doesn't have to be only with new partners too. Maybe you're listening to this podcast and you've been with your partner for 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, but you haven't had a lot of these kinds of conversations. You can bring it up. Maybe you've talked about it before, but a lot of time has passed and maybe things have shifted for folks.
Hmm.
Um, Desire and our turn-ons and turn-offs change throughout our lives. Um, so not everyone feels comfortable with just like, let's fuck. Some people, some people are, and that's fine. No shame or judgment there whatsoever. Some people might want a little more romance, some cuddling, some making out, some kind of kindness. These are kind of, there are different ways that people feel that spark of like, oh, I feel horny now. I feel like I want to get sexual. And that can be a lot of tension in relationships comes up when people maybe don't have the same style of arousal.
Yeah. And that can be tricky to talk about because
Yeah.
somebody who might want spontaneous sex might constantly feel like they're being rebuffed by a partner, but they feel like I've had a busy day. I've been doing all these things. I was kind of getting ready for bed. Like I wasn't prepared for this. And
Mm-hmm.
that is where the tension can come in, where we feel rejection. Being
Mm-hmm.
able to have these conversations before the act or before your desire comes in can be I would love to like be intimate with you. What are some ways that each of us kind of get into that mood? That conversation doesn't have to happen when you're about to have sex. That conversation can happen actually just to get to know your partner, recognizing that you're not being rebuffed or rejected. your partner might have just felt very differently about what you were attempting to do. And for many, actually having a day where they look forward to having sex is really important because the whole day they're kind of preparing themselves for that. They might be getting ready in a different way. They might not have a stressful day so that they can be in the mood for that. Another really important one is what time of day would you like to have sex? Sometimes at 9:30 p.m., you don't want to have sex because you're tired. What about the morning? What kinds of times of day do you want? Is it after a nice date? All these questions. That's the first thing you talk about with your partner.
Mm. Yeah. There are like a few different ways I've heard arousal being common too, right? Thinking about that again is like some folks get aroused because they just thought about it. Like the thought came through their head and then they're like, I'm horny, I'm ready to do this. And that's often when they might ask and maybe feel rebuffed.
Mm.
But then there's also more like through physical contact, that kind of feeling of like when we cuddle on the couch, then I start to get a little excited, and then we can maybe transition into playing. And then there's also that the kind of anticipation one that we're talking about. That's more the like we have a plan and we agreed to the plan, and now we get to look forward to it that Jesse was talking about. This can be a source of healthy communication, and it can also be a place that feels challenging and defeating. Because you could also be a partner who isn't turned on by cuddling. You're maybe more turned on by the anticipation or by the spontaneous thoughts, but you do like cuddling with your partner. And so then it can become a difficult pressure thing where it's like every time we cuddle, it feels like it has to lead to something. And so
Yes.
my guard is up and I feel this pressure. And just talking about that and having it out can allow both partners to know those expectations and to say, maybe check in at the beginning, like, do you want to just cuddle right now, or would you be interested in this leading to something? And then you can know.
Yes. What you're talking about is something that can come up in every facet of your life, but it will definitely come up here. That if you don't know the narrative of someone else, we usually make it up.
Yeah.
So if I don't like that cuddling always has to lead to sex, and my partner is like she's rebuffing me, she's kind of rejecting me, my partner might be like, she never wants sex.
Mhm.
Instead of having that conversation, we make up a narrative in our head if we don't communicate with our partner to find out what's actually happening. And what you're saying, Ryan, is by having those conversations, you're actually finding out about the other person's POV. And
Mhm.
then you both can come together to be like, oh, there's a mismatch here. How can we fix this? What can
Mhm.
we do that's a compromise that actually feels exciting? And if that's really hard to do with your partner, no worries. Couples therapy is awesome and can help you with that.
Yes, it can help with communicating about sex and all kinds of other relationship things. It's that are hard to do without someone kind of coaching you through it. And that's what one of the things a couples therapist can help you out with, just talking through how to talk, really.
Now, here's the one that I think would be the hardest.
Mm,
Um, Talking during sex.
mm,
Oof. What would you suggest, Ryan, when it comes to you're in the act? Because this is probably the part that gets silenced the most because
mm.
we don't want to do anything shaming while we're in an intimate space. What would you suggest with that kind of communication?
Actually, like as we were talking about this and transitioning to this kind of during sex time for communication, this could be something you talk about before as well to say like, hey, how do you feel about talking during sex, whether it's dirty talk or feedback kind of thing, and then you might find out that partner can say like, don't, please, unless you have to, obviously, like there always has to be an if you need to revoke consent kind of thing,
Yep.
but um I think one thing that can help knowing that is like you can make this part of the play in a way that might actually feel fun and engaging. Just like asking someone, do you like this? Or asking for something different by doing it in the affirmative when you
Mhm.
can. If you need to tell someone to stop something, tell them to stop something.
Yep.
But if you could instead say, could you go a little to the left? That doesn't feel like criticism. It feels like a connection. It feels like this is really good for me. Or keep doing that. Don't stop.
Yep.
these are kind of ways we can do that affirmation. Or you could even make it something of like, do you want to show me how you like it?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And then saying maybe what you want. Like, I want to be turned over. I want this. These things can actually then become quite sexy. And they're
Hmm.
not like, I don't like this necessarily. Again, if there's something you really don't like, absolutely. But if you just want an adjustment, there's sexy ways that you can do that.
Hmm. Absolutely. And this is one of the places that can make sex feel challenging and can lead to performance issues if we don't just like kind of say what we need. A lot of it just comes down to positioning, right? Like maybe you need a pillow under you.
Yes.
You need a pillow under your head, a pillow under your bum. Like there's all kinds of different things. And maybe the other partner needs you to have a pillow under you if you're okay with that, right? Because there's a lot of just, I don't know, trigonometry that goes into sex, right? Like it depends on people's body shape, and that includes the shape of the pelvis, that includes the shape of the penis, like the different angles and different things like that. Like be kind of thoughtful, learn a little bit about anatomy if you need to think like how do these things go together in a way that is comfortable and pleasurable.
Yeah.
And every body is different too, right? Like the diagrams in the medical books are approximations and they're 2D instead of 3D as well. So like they do not capture everything. So also just asking your partner, does that feel better?
Yeah.
Do you like it? Do you like what I'm doing?
And this is again where kind of media is really unhelpful because it looks like everyone else is kind of figured this out or having these wild experiences with different positions.
Hmm.
And you forget how many cameras it is, or on a page that, like, this is just someone's fantasy getting played out, that this is not reality.
And it might not even feel good. They might be doing it because it looks good, right?
Yes.
They're doing it for a certain kind of performance. And it's actually, as we're talking about this, I'm like, you know what they have when they do sex scenes, whether it's a porno or in a film or a show, they have an intimacy coordinator. Like they
Mm,
literally have someone talking them through communication so that the scene can flow and feel like good intimacy. So like we're basically saying intimacy coordinate yourself.
yeah. I mean, unless you need someone in there, I mean, that could be a whole thing that you could talk about with your partner.
I mean, I think intimacy coordinators do that as well. I don't know, up to you.
Up to you. After sex is another topic. Like all of these are going to be hard to do if you haven't done them before, and all of them are going to
Mhm.
be amazing to do if you can do it with somebody you trust.
Yeah.
But after sex, and Ryan will be talking later on, this is not the same as aftercare, which Ryan will be touching on. But after sex conversation is actually incredibly sexy because it's a time where you guys can talk about what did you like? What felt alive? What felt sexy? What would you like to have changed just slightly, if anything? That understanding is actually beautiful. It continues the act beyond just the physical into the emotional sphere of gratitude and excitement and
Mm.
of feeling good. There's a term like pillow talk where you get to have this intimacy with each other. Well, actually talking about sex after the act is an incredible way of bonding and getting closer with your partner. It doesn't have to be sterile. It can actually be something that allows everything in that act to feel like you guys are together, playing, being closer in that. And it's an excellent place where you actually get to talk about and feel praise about some of the things you might have tried out.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is just another space there because, like, if maybe you don't have the words or feeling too nervous during the sex to say something about it, and that's okay. A lot of people are kind of afraid of killing the mood, so to speak. And
Yeah.
that's why, the after can be one of those great times to do it. And it may also be that folks just feel like too occupied, too distracted to like form and express sentences when they're in the middle of performing or having something performed on them.
Hmm.
Yeah. But this talk can be challenging, right? Just like we recently talked about with having conversations in relationships that, are growthful conflicts. We have some communication tips that might be helpful for when you're dealing with really, for many people, nerve-wracking or potentially shaming topics. So one thing that you can do, and we've talked about this in conflict with relationships too, is like you can actually tell your partner what you need while you talk about it. You might just be able to tell them, I just need you to kind of hear this and not shame it. I want to talk more about this. I actually want to just say this and leave it. And really think about what would make it easier for me to share this, and is there something I can encourage my partner to do to do it. Um, so knowing what you need and expressing it to your partner before you dive into that conversation can be really helpful.
Oh yeah. Feel like, can you ask me 1,000 questions, please? I don't want to just like, feel like I'm dropping this in the ocean, or I want to just leave this here and walk away. Those are really important things for your partner to know how to respond.
Hmm.
But for the person listening, if someone sat you down and said, I'd like to talk to you about sex, that might feel weird. And we got some tips for you. The first one is that if you are, and this kind of conversation probably would not just be for a hookup. It probably would be with somebody that you've either seen a couple times or like this matters. It may not, but regardless, remember that this is important to somebody. This is something scary for someone to bring up to you. You're in an honored position if you are listening to this,
Hmm.
even if it's weird for you to have to hear, because what they're doing is they're welcoming you into their world. There's so many ways that we can do this as humans, but when we're giving something vulnerable to another person, it means we want them engaged and to understand us and to know us. And I think that's really important. This isn't a requirement on you to want this thing too. Remember that. Just because a
Hmm.
partner's telling you something that they deeply desire does not mean that you have to also desire that. But it's insight into their wants and their desires. And it's a gift to be told this information. I think that's a really helpful just mantra for you to hold on to when someone's sharing something about their sex desires.
Yeah. As we've talked about with other communication stuff too, like it's just helpful to focus on understanding the other person. I want to understand what they want to tell me.
Mm,
And I do love that reminder, Jesse, of like, yeah, that doesn't mean you listening and understanding doesn't mean that you're consenting.
yeah.
And that's something to also remember as a partner that's sharing something is like just keep in mind that even if they're listening and reflecting, that you still need to be getting consent, if it's something you're wanting to try. And
Mhm.
be open to your partners saying, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. That might not be for me, but I'm really excited to kind of hear that.
Right. Listening well is the same as it is in any conversation, conflict, important kind of meeting of folks. Like ask the questions that you need to ask, reflect back what you're hearing so you make sure you're understanding. This is especially when you feel like you might be taking something personally or misunderstanding them is a great time to reflect back and say, I'm hearing you saying this. And that way your partner can then say, no, I'm not saying that you're not good enough.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that. That's not what I mean at all. Um, so those reflections are a really good way to check for understanding and check that you're on the same page.
And then it's your time to check in. What
Mhm.
are your desires? It's kind of a mutual conversation. Um, is there something you want? Is it aligned with your partners? Hey
Mhm.
yo, is it not? Well, how do you compromise? Or what are things you can do that meets this really good middle ground for both of you?
Mhm.
Um, that's an awesome part. It's vulnerable having to share what our desires are. There's always room for rejection. If you're a listening person that like from someone sharing about their desires, I beg you not to shame it. You might be the
Mhm.
first person they've shared this with. You holding it well means everything to that person. Even if you don't understand exactly why they might want that, that's neither here nor there. If they're sharing it with you, they're being vulnerable, and that's awesome. And it usually
Mhm.
opens the window for you again, going back to our first point, of telling them what you want. What are your turn-ons? What do you desire? What do you fantasize about that could be played out in the bedroom? Becomes an alive space if you do it well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the absolute like, ideal outcome of this kind of thing is it becomes this playful, trusting space where you can each share what you're thinking about, what you're into, what you're not into, and actually have it be like fun and beautiful and
Mhm.
connecting instead of feeling scary or demanding. Um, and this might lead to talking about kink or BDSM things.
Mhm.
So we want to kind of touch on a little bit of kink info. So if you're going to talk about kink with your partner, I want to give you just some kind of a little bit to know and understand about that. Maybe you don't have any experience with kink. Maybe your partner doesn't either. Maybe one of you has more experience than the other. Um, Kinks and BDSM are ways that we engage with sex that might involve a power dynamic, that might involve role playing, that might involve other objects, or clothing, things that we find particularly arousing. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about like the difference between kink and fetish and like going through a bunch of acronyms because that's not what we're necessarily here to do. But when you're talking about kink, share your fantasies and interests, whether these are like scenes or kind of role plays that you're interested in, or maybe there are like certain types of player sexual acts that you're more interested in exploring. So some of it is more about a dynamic, some of it is more about an action.
Mhm.
If you don't know anything about it, look into it. If
Yep.
your partner is saying, I'm interested in trying this, and you don't know anything about it, ask them questions about it and also take some time to research on it and see maybe what it is that they're looking for so you can get your own understanding. Even if they do tell you and describe it well, you might also want to do a little bit of your own research, see what it might mean for you, see if there's other ways that it can show up so that you can be a full participant in that experience if you are wanting to, if you're consenting to do that. Um, and you can also just try it out if it's a low risk activity, right? There's a lot of kink stuff that is actually a very low risk activity, and folks sometimes want to just try it out, see what it feels like, try it a couple different ways, and then kind of say like, yeah, that's not for me, or I did like that way. And different people have more interest in exploring than others, so it's also an important conversation to have with partners to find out how much do you want to explore kink,
Yeah.
if at all. And what does that tell us about how aligned we are as sexual partners as well?
It's a way for you to be welcomed into their world, doing your own research, starting to think about, ooh, this doesn't feel like something I wouldn't want to try. Let me look into this. Let me see what this looks like for them. How do I engage with this in a way that actually I could be a participant and an actor in this? It can give you a little bit more autonomy as a sexual partner because you've been able to actually partake in this information yourself without just having the conversation.
Hmm. So some things within kink and BDSM that are pleasurable because of the physical sensation. And that might vary from person to person as well. Some things might be pleasurable more because of the power dynamic or the turn on. The power dynamic or what we call the headspace are the things that turn us on. So headspaces are a way of describing the kind of mental space that someone gets into when they're doing a kink scene, when they're in a short-term or long-term power exchange dynamic with someone. Um, so one of the most common ones that's spoken about is subspace. A lot of folks describe subspace as this kind of state where they feel very vulnerable, very obedient, very kind of sometimes like they're a little bit floating. They're a little out of their body in a way that feels good and positive. Um, it can give, for a lot of people, it gives kind of a break from maybe their mind racing, a break from needing to be responsible from everything. So it's actually not uncommon to find people who enjoy subspace who are in other areas of their life, high achieving leaders in control. Some folks seek that kind of break from
Mhm.
that. Subspace is a very different kind of state of mind to be in, and so it's important to consider how we transition in and out of that, and we'll get to that a little bit later.
Yeah.
And it's also important to talk with partners about how much do you want that? Do you want to just try out this physical act as the thing, or do you want to kind of go a little bit deeper, get a little bit more intense with that, and what do we need to set that up? Not discussed quite as much is Dom space, because so much of the focus is on the sub often in BDSM and kink power exchanges. But Doms often talk about a feeling of being really powerful, really elated, feeling this just like sense of command and authority. Um, and that might be something that feels really good for someone who maybe has been disempowered a lot, maybe has had a lot of doubts and felt really self-conscious about things, or feels like the degree of like confidence and maybe cockiness that they have isn't welcome in a lot of spaces, and they can just let go of that and fully be this like in charge kind of person. And so it's important to note that these spaces can play off each other. And again, that's where the communication around them is really essential to kind of understand what are the limits, especially when headspace comes in. You need to have an established way of communicating through kink scenes. This applies before, during, and after any BDSM or kink play. If you're in a long-term dynamic, it should be always on the table. A couple suggestions that are really common. I'm not breaking ground with these. One is a safe word. It needs to be a word that's not something you would accidentally say. It's something that you can say, and typically when the safe word is said, the scene stops and it immediately switches to communication and care. It's not a suggestion to slow down. It's not a suggestion to take a minute and then get right back to it. A safe word is a full stop. So I encourage, in addition to that, a traffic light system so that you can, unprompted or prompted by your other partner might kind of say traffic light, and you can respond with where you're at right now. And green is like, let's keep going, let's keep doing this. You can intensify even. Yellow is let's slow down or pull back a little bit, or you could establish maybe it means like let's chat. Red means I need this to stop for now and talk about it. So I kind of have a four-tier system that I would encourage of green, yellow, red, safe word. So have that in place so that if the subspace of the dom space is getting too intense or they're playing off each other in a way that makes one partner feel uncomfortable, you always have this way of communicating. Other options can be physical communication, some tapping, like tap me if you need me to stop, tap me twice if you need me to stop. Those are kind of suggestions. You can use hand signals as well. Um, just like your hand out flat could be stop. Gesturing towards yourself could be keep going or do more. So be creative, especially if you're doing some kind of play where communication is different.
Mhm.
There are other headspaces that we're not going to talk a ton about, but some people might do kind of a pet play headspace. There are kind of specific pups headspaces. If these are things that are interesting to you, look into some more, and I would suggest like connecting with the community and learning from them about what their experiences with these headspaces are.
It can be really tricky to want to go into those spaces if you've never done this before,
Hmm.
but almost always these spaces are welcoming, or there's people that are willing to engage. There's information out there, and recognizing that they're a possibility actually is really good. Ryan, I was thinking as you were speaking that people might not have realized that these things necessarily exist or
Hmm.
have been existing for them in their play. And being able to recognize that this might be where you're at and it is vulnerable and enlivening and exciting
Hmm.
is a really cool thing to start to realize. That subspace is a real deal. And that's really helpful if you're the dom in that relationship to realize that, oh, my partner's going into a different world. It's okay. It's a good thing. But I need
Hmm.
to then maybe be sensitive to that and vice versa.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. One thing that some people do talk about, after they've been in subspace. Some people talk about sub drop, some people talk about
Yep.
dom drop, and that's kind of like the reverse effect where maybe you feel very exhausted, very isolated, very disconnected,
Yes.
because it's such an intense level of intimacy.
Yeah.
Um, so I know a lot of folks who I've spoken to have kind of a plan, either with or without their partner. Because some people do this with a long-term partner, some people might do this with more of a hookup. It
Yep.
varies a lot, but know what you need to do. Learn like, okay, I need time to myself after this, or I need to have a normal everyday conversation with a friend. It doesn't need to be about this, but like I just need some cues that tell me that time's over and I'm moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
also where aftercare becomes essential.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, With kink, you're going to want to communicate ahead of time about your limits and your needs. You might not always know these beforehand, especially if you're new to exploring. So it always needs to be able to come back to the table. And if someone tells you a limit, you have to respect that. Okay. You don't have consent to do that thing, and if you do that, that's assault.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a overt specific limit, and it might be about types of play, types of headspaces, types of dynamics. And that's maybe you know that from experience. Maybe you've seen stuff in porn that you're like, absolutely never for me. That's a great thing to communicate as a limit. You can change your mind later if you want to, but it can't be changed for you. If you don't express your limits and needs around this, your partner will not know. Your partner will not know. So they are responsible for listening. You are responsible for sharing. It
Mm.
has to be that mutual discussion that creates that. And this is especially important in actually kind of hookup or short-term dynamics, that you start to know your limits to express them ahead of time, and
Yeah.
that you can kind of get, based on the conversation, the vibe that they are open to respecting those limits. Um, and you might find out that one of your limits means for the other person they're not interested because your limit is their favorite thing. That's okay. Then you're not a match. Stay safe. Um, One thing that's important for me to say about needs in any context, but especially in kink, is if you have a need, such as how someone speaks to you after the scene, how someone takes care of you, and we'll talk more about aftercare in just a second, the need is non-negotiable. But what you can discuss and negotiate is how it's met. You might have an idea of like, I need you to say this exact phrase to me. And your partner might say, I can't say that phrase. It feels some kind of way to me, or it doesn't feel authentic. But then you can talk about, can I meet that need by saying this instead, or doing
Mm.
this instead?
Yeah.
So that the need gets respected and attended to without someone being coerced into a kind of thing that they're not comfortable with or feels inauthentic. Because I will also tell you that if someone does or says something that you know that they don't want to do, you can probably are going to be able to tell. It's not going to feel good. It's not going to
Probably
feel
won't meet
authentic to
that
you.
need. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm.
So some things that you might need in terms of aftercare.
Yeah.
This is how you kind of come back to yourself and feel comfort after an intense experience, an experience that maybe was scary, maybe was painful, even if those things were desired. You're still going to want to feel some comfort and feel some support after this. People have different ways they want to receive aftercare and degrees to which they need to receive aftercare. So kind of check in with yourself and think about that. There's three kind of areas that I've thought about that often can be aftercare. So it could be very physical, it could be like a cuddling kind of intimacy afterwards. It could be about having food and water, having a big cozy blanket. It could be about taking a shower afterwards, alone or with someone. It could be even about quiet. You might need some quiet time with someone or to yourself. And where your aftercare needs might clash because aftercare is not only for the sub, it is also for the dom. It's for everyone who is in the scene. You might need to negotiate a little bit about maybe one person says, I need quiet cuddling time. And the other person says, I need to talk about it. And verbal is the next one we're going to get into. And so you can agree to a way to like, okay, we will start with one or the other. We will start with some quiet time and then we'll talk about it. Or we'll talk about it and then we'll start some quiet time. And just knowing, again, really wanting to remind people that it's not only for the submissive. It is also intends to do this as a dom. Yeah. And so the verbal things, they might be affirmations, they might be just talking about what you did, having the kind of conversation we were talking about earlier, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you want to see more of, some comfort, some reassurance. And depending on the headspace and type of play, it can kind of be a part of that too. It can kind of be to a degree in those roles, if that's something that is desired and meaningful. And it might be about doing something that's not kink at all. It might be an alternative kind of activity, like let's just watch a show together. Let's go for a walk. Or I'm going to go to the cafe without you. It could be whatever kind of thing needs helps you kind of transition.
Yeah. And I think then that also comes into what you're talking about what might I need after that's done? What do I need like
Hmm.
after this? Do I need to be with a friend? Do I need to spend like not have evening plans? What do I need to allow my body to feel comfortable again? And all of those things are exactly thinking about what your desires, your needs, your wants are, and knowing yourself.
A lot of times these kink negotiations, once you do them or learn about them, they can actually be applied to vanilla sex as well,
Oh, yeah.
right? It's basically hyper consent, right? You're being really specific and clear. Just because you have vanilla sex and only want to have vanilla sex doesn't mean that you can't expect cuddling and talk about, I want to cuddle afterwards.
Yeah.
Because if your partner might not know that if you just have sex and then they get up and go back to what they were doing, that you feel something about that. And you might not know that your partner feels like trapped if you want to cuddle for more than 10 minutes. Like you got to talk about these things.
I think one of the things that kink allows us to do is realize that conversation's actually part of being able to set the perfect scene.
Hmm.
It's not about parameters and just consent. It's about how am I going to be able to let go in this scene in a way that allows me to go to those spaces of subspace or dom space because I feel safe enough to do so. And any kind of sex allows that. These conversations beforehand allow us that safety and that comfort and that excitement to be able to let go. And I think especially we can kink, it's so I know I'm not going to be harmed in a way I don't want to, or something's
Hmm.
going to happen to me that I have an out if I need it. But I think you're right. In every form of sex, these are the ways that we get to feel safe.
Hmm.
The last thing I think we want to talk about before we let you go on our sex episode is that just to remember that it might not be perfect the first time. If you're with a partner and you're figuring these things out or someone you want to play with again and again, the first time might be a bit messy. And that's perfect. It's your first attempt at figuring something out. You're perfecting it. You're getting to know each other's bodies. Someone might have really wanted something and realized, oh, that's actually not nice. I don't like that. It was really cool in my head, but my body's not feeling it. Those things are all awesome, playful information. And if you think about it as play, as something intimate and exciting and joyful, it's not about you. If someone doesn't like something that's being done to their body, it's about them and them knowing actually, oh, my body doesn't quite love this. It's a way for you guys to kind of get to know each other. And if there's an act you don't want to do, being able to let your partner know that or negotiating, like, why not? Tell me more. A lot of us don't come into sex for the first time ever. We might have had other acts that we've done or been engaged with that didn't feel right with that relationship. It might change now. As Ryan's been saying throughout the podcast, our interests change and it might depend on the partner and what we want with them and what they can and cannot necessarily give us when it comes to our fantasies. This is all good. And being able to start with communication, as two therapists would be telling you, this is how you do it.
Thank you so much for tuning in today and listening to what we think about having good sex.
If you have any questions, make sure you DM us. If there's anything else topics wise you want us to chat about, let us know. As you can tell, we're willing to go there. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our others. And stay tuned for even more episodes coming up.
Follow us and leave a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please tell your friends.
You can also follow us on Instagram too at Your Therapist Is Not Okay. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, send us a DM there. We would love to answer your questions. And a lot of our topics come from listeners just like you.